quite apt at the moment. So, and just before we kick off our main event, I'd just like to introduce Amy to the stage. She just has a very quick message.
Okay guys, every so often I do work for traditional media, and I'm writing a story at the moment about your favourite app, your worst app, the app you most like to see, and also I need to profile an app. So can you either post on your Facebook page or tweet me, SMCAKL, all those things, and if you are an app developer and you want your app profile to appear on Sunday, come and see me. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's say most of us remember this happening. Somehow I'd be interested to see what would happen if this happened in this day and age, in an age where video evidence of everything and social sharing is rampant. Somehow I suspect that this might have even less grounding and stand now than it did then. Well, without further ado, it is time to kick off our X-rated, juicy, sealed section of the evening. Basically, sex on the internet, and I guess this does include porn, has always relied on privacy, whereas social media thrives on social sharing. What happens though when you include Tinder, Grindr, online dating and Snapchat to the mix? Does it totally change the game? Can we really be authentic people online? Does online dating work? Well, to answer all of our wonderful questions this evening, we have a fantastic panel, so I'd like to welcome them to the stage. To my left, we have Louise Campagoni, who from Find Someone New Zealand. She is the head of New Zealand's largest and longest running online dating website. She has been witness to a number of online dating success stories. So no doubt we'll have quite the interesting view for us this evening. We also have Kyle McDonald. Kyle is a very experienced psychotherapist who has quite the interest in relationships and how technology is impacting our interactions online. He's the co-director of Robert Street Clinic in Ellerslie and a weekly contributor to Radio Live. Finally, we also have Trapp Gray, who is the voice of Love Your Condom, the New Zealand AIDS Foundation campaign that is happening at the moment. Track is very, very familiar with using social to tackle the big topics, so no doubt we'll have quite an interesting view tonight. So, without further ado, Louise, does online dating really work?
Well, we have had a lot of success stories, obviously, about online dating. We've had thousands, in fact, and I would say more success stories than we've had complaints, which is always good. So in the whole history of Find Someone, we've only had one, which is since 2001. We've had one scam on our site and countless success stories, so I think that's a pretty good sign. But with that said, I think that online dating can work to a point, and that might be quite controversial for me to say, but I like to say that we can provide you with everything but the spark. So I am sort of taking a bold approach as the head of Find Someone to say that it may not find you a soulmate. I can't promise that. I can't promise that you're going to get married from doing online dating. What I can promise is that we will introduce you to more people, you will get more dates, and more likely people that you're compatible with, but not necessarily a definite hit.
Kyle, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree largely. I mean, I think that the interesting thing is I sort of get frustrated, as I'm sure a lot of you do, when the advent of these new technologies get presented in the media as either good or bad. I think it really sort of collapses how we can think about them as good and bad. And one of the strengths, without question, of things like Tinder and Find Someone is just sample size, right? I mean, the more options, the more connections are available to us, the better chances we have of finding a match. But call me old-fashioned, but fundamentally, love and getting a match actually happens offline. So it's a vehicle to actually meet people. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is when you start to look at what more comfortable, more long-term users of social media experience, what we see is that actually people value the connection and intensity of relationships online more if they're experienced in that space. So experienced users tend to find social media connection meaningful than others. So my guess is that probably be similar with online dating. People who are more experienced online will find it more useful.
Great. Does this mean, though, that we can be our true selves online?
Well, I guess I'd ask everyone what's being our true selves offline. I mean, we're all pretty complicated, really, even if we try to deny that to ourselves. And I think we're all prone to present aspects of ourselves in different ways. There's no question that Facebook in particular has a pretty well-established bias. We tend to present all the good stuff. But I think that experienced users can see through that. There's a lot of research that actually suggests that experienced users on Facebook can see through that very easily.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that it is often the less experienced people in online dating who do get targeted. And we have a trust and safety team at Find Someone, and they sort of were saying that a lot of the dating scammers almost use bad spelling and so on as a direct way of targeting potentially less educated users, which I thought was quite shocking, but also not surprising. I think that a lot of these scams are sort of so obvious that you would think, well, how could you miss that? But the reality is, a lot of our target users are 30 to 55 and Find Someone, and probably more towards the 55 end may not be as familiar with online dating.
Now, Track, obviously, Love Your Condom is quite an interesting issue. What kind of engagement do you find that people have with the campaign online?
I think that Love Your Condom is quite interesting because it works quite differently in different spaces depending on.
Sorry, I'll release.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Love Your Condom is quite interesting because it works differently. People respond very differently in different spaces. So we go full spectrum from signs at the bus stop to posters in an orgy room at a sex on site sauna. So it's really quite broad. And most of our online spaces, like general social media channels like Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, people just want something fun that they can share that they can get on board with. And something they can take ownership of. So it's not too tropey about playing into gay stereotypes and that kind of stuff, but it speaks to what they're doing, it speaks to their behaviour. So we're actually talking about guys, because we're specifically for men who have sex with men. So we're talking about guys getting with other guys and creating a social context for that, giving people stuff to talk about in those social spaces, which I think is quite important because if you don't have someone really pushing that, it's really easy to feel like you don't have a voice. So I think people take on Love Your Condom as an identifier of not just safe sex, but actually being able to talk about sex and having some validity to that.
Do you think it is reducing any stigma that might have existed, or?
Yeah, definitely. Just seeing the word condom on Facebook, seeing the word condom around the place and then hearing it on Facebook totally reinforces that, I think. Because at least you've got a couple of people around you saying condom all the time, then it's really easy to feel like, oh, do I say that word? The wrong one? So yeah, I think it's really important to have that dialogue out there.
Great. Louise, stigma no doubt is something that you guys encounter in an online dating site. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that the stigma of online dating has definitely lifted from what it has, 10 years ago. I mean, there was a study recently in the US that said a third of people are reported to have met through online, specifically online dating, which I think is a pretty compelling figure. And I was thinking with that's just the people who actually tell the truth about it. I encounter a lot of people who kind of whisper that they're on Find Someone as if it's some sort of dirty secret still. And I think if you're going to be on any site, Find Someone's pretty wholesome. So I think that we've still actually got a long way to go. I think we still have this notion of love happening to us through fate, and I think that you know, it's interesting that we use digital for so many things, for finding a job, you know, for communicating with our friends on Facebook, but we still have these very like traditional notions about how we're meant to find our other half, and you know, a job you might have for 2 years, and you know, your partner you could have forever. So it's interesting that we sort of still have this quite archaic view.
Apps like Tinder having any impact on you guys, do you think?
The interesting thing about Tinder is that I think it has actually normalised online dating, but there's something about apps where people almost think that they're not online somehow, that it's not online dating, it's Tinder, which, you know, as if it's something quite separate. We actually saw exactly with the launch of Tinder, our 18 to 25-year-old market skyrocket. But what this didn't do was actually increase our revenue. So I think the other thing that Tinder has done is actually set the precedence for free online dating, which I think is you know, a trend that actually has followed and challenged a lot of models for online dating.
Who in the crowd has used Tinder? Now, who in the crowd has used online dating?
Now who really has? You can chat to me later.
Kyle, what are your thoughts around this kind of online world? Is it any more shallow than it is to stand across a bar and look someone and decide you quite like the look of them and you wouldn't mind having a chat to them later in the night?
No, in fact, probably in some ways it's safer. I think one of the things that really appeals to me, and I have advised people to use online dating in my practice, particularly people who are isolated or might suffer from social anxiety, because it's safe. You can mediate how much contact you have, you can be sober, you can hope that the other person is sober, and you're at home, at least to start with. So there's a lot of safety provided. And I think that can be quite a good lead, and as long as people remember to get offline and actually meet the person at some point.
I think it's also great for people on Find Someone, for example. There's a lot of people in a situation where their actual social circle won't allow them to meet single people. So the most common scenario is all their friends are getting married and there's no one single left, or the people who are left as dicks. And then the other one, you can tell me this stuff. And then the other one is that, you know, someone's been married for 25 years, their marriage ends. My doctor told me this the other day, and his marriage ended and he's not ready to be put on the shelf, he's in his 50s, and asked me what I thought about online dating for him, which was interesting. More than you want to know about your doctor. But I think, I actually think the fact that he hadn't considered it earlier is interesting. I mean, he's a GP, he's also a vegan Buddhist, so I'm imagining that that's kind of getting the niche down quite a lot, if we were to look at figures. And we were talking earlier about the great thing about online dating in larger populations actually allowing for these fantastic niche sites where people might otherwise not be able to meet people, which I think is fantastic.
Is online dating still safe when there is such a high risk of people being untruthful? Has anyone here seen the TV program Catfish?
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of my personal faves. For those of you who have not, it is basically a documentary show that mixes up with people who have been having some, what for them are quite intense online relationships. Some of
so, then you know they probably just want the booty. That's them like holding a puppy, they're probably out for a relationship. It just like crosses into opposite sex dating as well. But because in gay and bisexual spaces there's quite a culture of hooking up, and a lot of the dating side of things, even speaking from personal experience, I'm very good at giving myself away to these types of things. But you know, like I and probably most of the people that I would meet on these spaces prefer to have sex on the first date, or get that intimacy out of the way, like the kiss at the start of the date. Because if you already had a cool conversation, you've got 5 friends in common on Facebook, you've checked out where they were, and you know that they look kind of cute, at least some of their pictures, then you know they're probably fine. You know you're probably going to get along with them, ask your friend in common what they like. So that whole culture of Facebook stalking someone is quite ingrained, and there's a culture, like it's fine to be able to go and meet someone at a cafe and then go and have sex with them. You can sort of talk a bit more openly like that. And if people aren't into that, you can say, oh, sorry, that's how I'm going to operate, and negotiate something there. But it's, yeah, I think just because it's so much more normalised, people don't have those anxieties about necessarily giving too much away, because they know if they want to have sex, they know if they want to meet someone cool to hang out with.
I think that's a definite shift, because I think the original sort of online dating was very much about creating a really artificial, almost like a resume version of you. Like I listen to jazz, you know, I like romantic walks with sunsets.
That's your Facebook.
Yeah.
The CV that someone finds on you.
Yeah, absolutely. You think, is that LinkedIn, or is that, you know, are you trying to find someone? Where we're actually heading is, and a lot of other online dating sites is almost trying to get into more of that dynamic social media trends, which I think a lot of sites are really way ahead of online dating. Like, you know, you look at Spotify, we just say I'm into jazz, but Spotify will say, well, your friend is listening to Miles Davis kind of blues. So we're actually looking at doing all that sort of social integration with our profile, so that it does change to more, you can actually see how someone's behaving rather than what they say they are.
Which is fascinating from the point of view of our unconscious giving us away, like we were talking about beforehand, that actually some of these methods can point you towards people that you would say you're not attracted to, but you click on their profiles anyway, and it starts to meld what you're actually doing versus how you would think you were.
I was telling Kyle about, probably so fascinated, the different algorithms of online dating, sorry, and how the traditional way is like a sort of profile-triggered algorithm, so it's you saying, I don't want to meet a non-smoker. But then there's almost like a parallel one, which is more about you clicking on a smoker, which indicates actually perhaps that isn't as important to you. So your behaviour actually defies your profile.
Yeah, and at the risk of stretching the metaphor, I think we all actually have our own internal algorithm. You know, I mean, our unconscious is an algorithm that points us towards a certain attraction towards certain other people.
And Kyle kind of aptly said that that sort of algorithm, if you're presented with someone that we recommend, that could be quite confronting if that's not the sort of person you imagine that you're attracted to.
Sorry, people have been laughing at the screen behind you at what you're saying.
Yeah.
When it comes to Facebook, what about when the real life dating switches to online? Come on, let's be all honest, guys. Who has met someone and then headed to Facebook for a wee cheeky Facebook stalk?
Yep.
I feel like there's definitely some people in the crowd that are lying. Seriously, who hasn't done that?
I recommend to people to do that. I literally, if people are having doubts about whether someone is genuine, and say, I'm like, head to Facebook.
Can it put you off though? Can it kind of, the way that somebody presents themselves on Facebook, being not quite them?
I think it should put you off if it puts you off, because there's some really interesting studies around the accuracy of how people are familiar with these spaces. There was one quite large study in the States where they found people with narcissism, a particular kind of personality disorder. They shuffled their profiles and presented like that. And normal, non-psychologically trained people picked narcissists out of the Facebook profiles with about 90 degrees of accuracy. So So what that tells us is that actually Facebook is a really good resource and a really good safe way of checking out people first. And I know it's called stalking, but we give permission for this information to be online. So it's not like people are looking through our windows. They're actually looking at information that we've made public. Yeah, that would be very
I think it's quite difficult to have a fake Facebook profile as well, because particularly when you're gay and out about it, you tend to have similar networks. I mean, I work a lot with Cobalt, so not everyone's gay. I'm not complaining about. But I think you generally have had a couple of friends in common, and that friends in common thing is quite a strong indication of what circles someone hangs out in, or shared interests, all that kind of stuff. So it's quite easy to get a feel for that. And from personal experiences, and those are some friends, the people that you Facebook stalk and find that you don't really like have tended to be the ones where you were never really that sure anyway. That's why you went to their Facebook to check. So it's kind of, it generally feels like something to validate a feeling that you're already quite ready to trust, because it's like 4 AM you're really horny, rather than actually give it. Sorry.
Can online dating and online dating apps be good for our self-esteem?
Why don't you answer that one, given your recent experience?
That's interesting, because there are some people I'm very cautious to suggest online dating to, because online dating is, particularly on apps, gay bi dating apps, they are really racist spaces, great at body shaming. There are profiles that's quite common to scroll through, getting less so, which is awesome, but it's common to see things like no femmes, no fatties, no Asians, no Indians, and people don't, there are still a lot of people who don't understand how racist and body shaming and offensive that is, and even if you're not interacting with those people directly, you're still encountering that over and over, and I think that's quite disempowering to feel really valid in those spaces. So there's, with the openness that comes with how normal it is to be gay and on using these apps, there's definitely a downside where people don't challenge themselves, they don't run it through their own filter first. So it's a complex thing. It can be empowering for people if it works well for them, if they meet cool people and find people aligned with them. But when it's a space where half the people are just looking to have sex with someone, then they can get pretty honest and blunt in quite a cruel way quite quickly. So it's, yeah.
Louise, is that something you find that happens across find someone?
Yeah, I think, I was saying this earlier, I think that people underestimate the amount of resilience that you need for online dating. I think people almost think it will be completely unemotional because it is digital, and that you won't have those same sort of feelings and sensations that you do from dating in real life. But we did some research recently with some of our users, and our researchers just came out of it and went, oh God, that was exhausting. Because there was people crying, talking about what I call binge dating, which I think happens a lot in online dating. It's that initial kind of flurry and excitement of being online and getting attention, getting smiles and winks and messages, and going on loads of dates, and then just kind of being exhausted by it all. And it might just be one person that you've invested all of this energy into who rejects you, and then it can just lead to actually quite a lot of self-doubt. And the same if someone kind of rejects your profile, it's not so much that person and I aren't compatible, it's a lot more to do with, oh, it's me, there's something wrong with me.
Because you've chosen your best self to portray as well, so having that criticised can be quite confronting if you aren't ready for it.
Should I give the optimistic bit?
Yeah.
I read a really interesting brief study today with a small sample size. But Tinder, and just that initial gamification process of swiping and finding matches, after doing it for half an hour, the sample, and it was gay and straight, felt 20% more optimistic about the possibility of finding a match and of dating being a positive outcome. So, I mean, who knows what happens next, but that initial process seems quite engaging and quite motivating.
I guess it would be kind of almost the same as being at an event and meeting 10 people that you potentially quite liked as opposed to one, yeah?
Especially if you get down to those sort of niche dating sites, like there's some in the US in particular, like there's midget dating and Star Trek dating. You know, imagine, like, it might be hard to find a girl who's really into Star Trek, potentially, who's also cute in New Zealand, but then, you know, Star Trek dating, you know, you might have 10, for example, you know, more than that. So I actually, I was also reading, you know, quite a really kind of touching article the other day about someone who'd had cervical cancer and was unable to have sex as a result of it because was really scarred. And she had had that experience of going on online dating and thinking, well, I can't actually have sex anymore. So, you know, she suddenly had these really extreme self-esteem issues. And there was actually a dating site for people to have intimacy without sex because they were physically unable to, which I think is, you know, that completely transformed her whole life, which is incredible.
Great, now before we kind of turn it over to the floor, because I'm sure you all have quite a few burning questions, I've just got a few questions that came through to us via the RSVP stage. Now, this is something that might have kind of already been touched on tonight, but will social media / online dating ever fully replace face-to-face meeting? And what impact will that have on future generations?
There won't be any future generations.
I think it won't replace it, but I think it will become a really normal part of it. I think they'll be integrated because already in the sort of out-gay scene, for want of a better word, or, you know, people who are just being gay is a normal part of their life. If you're single and you want to meet someone, probably on Grindr or one of the apps that some of them have sort of tailored for more different types of guys, different ages and stuff like that. But it's completely normal to be on there, and even if you have a conversation with someone or see someone and then 5 weeks later see them in a club or meet them at a work event or something, you can say, oh yeah, I saw you on Grindr, oh yeah, we had that talk on Scruff, and it's not this taboo where you're both trying to pretend like you're all on there. So I think as a case example, I can totally see that becoming a thing for everyone.
I also think, you know, I said earlier that online dating and apps and social media only get you to the point of actually meeting that person, and then the rest you have to leave to chemistry, because I think a lot of our attraction to people is like just really redundant biological stuff, and we're putting on, I don't know if any of you have read about the pheromone party that we're putting on next week, but there's a lot of research about genetics and pheromones and how much we're attracted to people. So I read that actually not only are we attracted to the look of symmetrical people, but we can smell symmetry. So women can actually, when given t-shirts worn by men with symmetrical faces, will prefer their faces, and in just the same way that men can actually prefer the smell of a woman when she's ovulating. We are just baby machines. Yeah. We're animals, yeah. Symmetrical animals.
Hey, so another question that we've had come through is it more socially acceptable to ask somebody out at an event, i.e. SMCAKL, or should you hit Tinder, Facebook, Twitter, and do it that way?
Can we just say who is that person, and do you want to come up now and ask them out?
Looking to the crowd.
I don't know if it's more socially acceptable, but I think it's really easy to forget that for a lot of people, meeting someone and asking someone out on a date is a horrifically terrifying experience. Such attractive, confident people, I'm sure you won't be able to identify with that, but for a lot of people, and you know, when I think about my day-to-day work, when I deal with people who are depressed or have anxiety or are isolated socially, the idea of asking anybody out in any context is just too overwhelming to even contemplate. So it offers a bridge in a way.
What I think is interesting though is that you know, it's an untraditional, like a new way of communicating with people, but quite traditional behaviours still happen. Really commonly we find that men on our site are the first to send a message, and that women kind of stand back and kind of wait for the attention to come.
Chivalry.
Yes, exactly.
I think there are different online spaces as well for different types of attraction. Like if you see someone at SMCAKL and you just want to root them, then it might be a bit hard to make that leap in person because you might just be really distracted as you're talking to them. But if you've got an app where it's a space where you can sort of talk a bit more openly and directly, and they're not gonna, there's no risk of getting punched in the face, then that dialogue is easy to come by. It's easy to sort of negotiate what you want and what they may want. Overseas, particularly, Twitter's not huge here like it is overseas, but I've got lots of friends who use Twitter as their primary dating app because they still portray their own views in it. They're talking about political views and all that kind of stuff and use a professional context, but with direct messaging, they can talk to someone whose Twitter profile they really like or someone they met and actually have a conversation and engage with them, and it's a more Facebook level thing where they want something long term to come out of it. So you can negotiate those different spaces and play them to their strengths.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of comes down to, in a way, people's intentions and why they're there, right? Yeah. Okay, so just one final question before we turn it to the floor. So obviously online dating and apps like Tinder really put the emphasis on looks. Do you think we're more judgmental in that sort of online space than we are in real life?
I think it reflects how we are in real life. There's some really clear studies that show that what we do on Tinder is exactly what we do in real life. So, taking large groups of people and matching them on every criteria except for ethnicity and physical attractiveness, presenting people with their perfect matches, and without fail, the one that they pick out of the 10 perfect matches is the one that they find the most physically attractive on first impression. So Tinder is what we do.
I'm going to reveal something behind the scenes. Can you hear me? No. I'll reveal something behind the scenes now about find someone, is that we have a hotness algorithm. Yeah. So one of our geeky developers, it's his Pride and Joy. So basically, if you do this particular sort order, I'm not going to tell you what it is, you will get all of, I believe, the hottest people on our site, but that's all based on popularity, like the amount of interactions that they've had, the amount of messages and so on, so that completely supports your point.
Yeah. The other thing which is a bit contradictory, which has been proven time and time again, is that we tend to pick people for long-term relationships that are roughly as attractive objectively as us. The number that I heard, which I like, is out of 10 plus or minus 2. So if you objectively rate people, your partner's going to be plus or minus 2 as to where you sit.
Will you just have the batteries down on the microphone? Always wait for the best moments to do it.
Excellent. Okay, so now it's time to have everybody's involvement in the crowd. Do we have a question for the panel?
We do have an audio stream, so if you'd like to use this, it would be really helpful for people on the internet. We like people on the internet, come on.
Yeah, hi, this is for Fatima. I always wondered where you have got one of those things, here's something you might like, so, you talk to someone and it doesn't work, and hey, well, you might like this instead.
Funny you should say that, because it goes, it's all about algorithms, but we are actually looking at doing something similar to that, which is based on Netflix technology, because we're all like DVDs. So a few dating sites have actually done this already. So you've been chatting to someone who likes horror films, is a non-smoker and lives in Wellington. It's not working out, but you might also like these other ones who are quite similar, which I think is kind of creepy, but also cool.
Can we overlay the plus and minus 2 on top of that as well?
Maybe we can have a dial.
Hi, I'm just curious, just a bit on the darker side of sex and social media. Now that youth is on social media and very active in that space, I remember when I was growing up, the sex talk, that's all my parents had to worry about, but now there's so many spaces where youth are being objectified to sexual content, if you will, and it's very accessible to them. How is that something that we need to deal with? How is that going to affect that generation that is basically Snapchatting away, there's no control, if you wish, and porn is easily acceptable? How do you feel that's going to change sex in general for future generations?
With the Love Your Condom website, we've got a section called Ask a Sexpert where people can ask a question about anything related to being gay or bisexual or anything like that. And we get a lot of really young guys asking the questions that they can't ask in school or with their family or even with their friends because they're closeted and all that kind of stuff. And I think with the added accessibility to maybe negative things or uncontrolled educational influences, there is also that added access to the right things, added access to support. There are guys that interact with Love Your Condom online, and we can then put them through our New Zealand AIDS Foundation clinics where they get free counselling, or a bunch of other youth services like Rainbow Youth and stuff. We can actually, we've got a dialogue with them, and we're really active about trying to reach those guys within our resources. And so, we make sure that the Love Your Condom website is within the first 3 rankings for search results around Google search, on Google around gay sex or anti-sex or that kind of stuff. We make sure that if people are searching for porn or searching for things around their sexuality, they're getting to us first so that we can actually help guide them and give them a comfortable space to find that stuff. So I think people naturally respond to what's out there. The more risky things that people may be coming across, the more supportive and really great things people put out there as well. So there is a way that it gets managed, but I definitely think it's a valid thing to be paying really close attention to.
And without doubt, there's 2 clear factors. The first one is good information. I think one of the things that we can do as parents and as adults is underestimate young people's ability to process and deal with information. That actually what we need to be presenting is good information, straight and gay, about sex and talking about it openly. And the other thing, which is really general but is important to say, that the #1 protective factor for any high-risk behaviours in young people is a close, loving, warm attachment relationship with their parents. So if you want to protect your kids from bad behaviour on Snapchat or on Tinder, make sure you're talking to them every day.
Do you think that because it's so accessible now and it's everywhere, do you think it's sort of where sex used to be something special and you saved your virginity with that someone you love, do you think it's becoming more of a commodity for youth these days where it's just more and more just an activity like breathing or playing soccer or something? You Snapchat naked photos of yourself when you're 13 years old or something. I mean, parents don't want to admit it, but the reality is I think teens are actually using chat rooms to, I remember MSN back in my day, which was not clean.
There's no question there's risks associated with it, and everything on the internet is amplified, but I don't fully buy the idea that the risks are different. I think young people have always been doing risky things. There's more amplification and perhaps the age is sliding, but I think young people have always been doing risky things.
I also think there's some, it kind of ties into your point about the fact that at least it's potentially monitored. So, I always I found that when I find someone when there is problems with, violence and potentially risky situations, it's more often than not actually when they've left the site, and they might have, they might be communicating just in email or something like that, because it is actually in, on social media and in kind of online forums where there is moderation, and we have some pretty smart technology to be able to detect things.
Another question?
Explain that one.
Hi. So the sort of notion of romantic love only sort of originated quite recently in human history.
OkCupid, the 3 questions that they say are in common with couples who have had successful relationships as a result of their site. There's 3 things. One is, do you like horror films? The second is, would you ever travel alone in a foreign country? And then the third one is, would you throw it all in just to sail around the world? Which I think is, nothing to do with status or anything like that. It is actually genuinely to do with personality. So potentially it could actually help us more so to get in touch with that.
And I'm a bit of a cynic about romance. There was some really interesting. Well, I guess it depends on what you define as romance. So the idea of soulmates, which a lot of American dating sites market themselves on as guaranteeing to find your soulmate. People who enter a relationship with the idea that having a soulmate or a perfect match is important to them actually have a lower than average chance of that relationship being successful. People who have ideas that are around what they call work it out beliefs, the ability to talk and communicate and work through issues, have a higher than average chance of success. So it depends on what you mean by romance, but I think sometimes romance trips us up because it means that we just rely on our feelings and we stop thinking.
I found it really interesting in the OIC space and in my own personal blogging spaces where I'm talking to people about sex toys is that giving people language to talk about something is really important. As soon as someone knows that it's okay to say condom, knows that it's okay to admit that they've got a Grindr profile or a Find Someone profile, and they can use words like sex and talk about who they're into. As soon as you add each layer of that on, it's normalised and people can acknowledge it for what it is. There's not this mystery around it. There's not all this pretense. It's a bit more honest. And I think as soon as you can talk about sex, you actually confront someone on sex. You can ask someone if you're not comfortable having sex with someone, you can ask them if they would be comfortable with that and let them know that you're not. So I think there's more information out there for us to hold on to, and as long as there's the right people giving the right tools and the right dialogue and language and empowerment to people, it can be a really awesome way of meeting people.
So one thing I'll add to that is going back to the point about romance, is I think that there is an equal facade in romance, and a friend of mine who's a social worker once said, if a guy runs a bath for you and puts rose petals in, run for the fucking hills. Which I actually, I do think that I like the fact that online dating, you do seem a bit cheesy if you say, I'm going to run to the bath and put rose petals in. It almost gets to that kind of comfortable at home in your jammy stage a bit sooner, which, if someone is doing that early on, more than likely they're not going to be doing it after a few years.
So how many dates is it appropriate to see someone in a onesie?
2!
So we've got time for one more question.
Do you think that online dating has been successful in challenging traditional gender roles in dating?
You probably can say more about this than me, but the data that I read would say no, because actually what tends to happen online, as you alluded to, is that the traditional roles get acted out. And actually, from what I understand, one of the things that can really put women off when they first go into internet dating is they get flooded with males. And of course, the complete opposite happens for men, is they get put off because they're on there for a month and they don't do anything and no woman approach them. So, if anything, it probably amplifies those differences.
I was just going to say, we found exactly the same. Also, there's it's the way that people, the sort of women that men are attracted to. For example, in our site, they might be looking for a 20-year-old blonde, but in reality, the people that are responding to their messages are 40-year-old brunettes because they themselves are 40-year-old brunettes. So it's kind of the stereotype that you would imagine in real life. Actually, not only plays out, but is potentially amplified on that side.
I think it's interesting in the gay and bisexual space because in those spaces you're operating outside of gender norms, and in traditional spaces, person to person, it's they're generally held in a heterosexual culture. So you're in straight society, so you act the straight way. when you can step outside of that into an online space that's a gay space, you are free from either being, trying to be this like manly man who makes all the moves or being the needy girlfriend. And it's a pressure that a lot of particularly younger gay guys feel, because there are a lot of ideas in straight society around being gay means that it emasculates you and all that sort of stuff, whereas it's giving guys those really social spaces to operate outside of that, and they don't have to leave their home. They can be at home with mum and dad being 17, but they can still be in those spaces where their sexuality doesn't impact their gender. So I think there's really something in that. There is the side to it where people are more direct about are you top or bottom, and if you top you're the man, and if you're the bottom you're the girl. But it gets weeded out pretty quickly. Those spaces kind of manage themselves. So yeah, I'm curious to see if that would happen, and as it gets normalised for straight people, I think that'd be really cool.
Cool. Hey, well, we're going to actually have to wrap it up there because we are out of time, but we would love you all to join us across the road at Sabraj, which is part of SMCAKL, for a few drinks and to continue this discussion later. Our next event is coming up on August, and so we do hope you can all come along and join us for this. But just before we end the night, I've always fancied a bit of an open moment at SMCAKL, so can everyone please just look down and look under their chairs? Now, who can see some trash? If you could all just pick that up and pop that in the